Have you ever stopped to think about how a giant company, one with thousands of employees, suppliers all over the globe, how it all just works without completely falling apart? Well, the answer is this kind of invisible force called Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP. And today, we're going to break it down. Think of it as the central nervous system of a modern business.
So let's kick things off with a big question. A single car has something like 30,000 parts. I mean, just think about that. How on earth does a car maker make sure every single one of those parts gets to the right assembly line at the exact right moment? This is the core problem that these massive systems were invented to solve.
But to understand how we got to this huge, all-in-one solution, we've got to go back to the beginning. It all started with a much more focused system called Materials Requirements Planning, or MRP for short.
So what is MRP? At its heart, it's a computerized system that does one thing, and it does it incredibly well. It manages the flow of physical stuff, parts, materials, you name it. This was basically the secret sauce behind the just-in-time manufacturing revolution, the one made famous by companies like Toyota. It's all about getting materials exactly when you need them and not a second before. Precision and timing, that's the whole game.
And what's really cool is how simple its goals are. The whole power of MRP boils down to just three things. You need the right part, in the right quantity, at the right time. That's it. But if you get even one of those wrong, you're looking at either a huge, costly delay on the production line or a warehouse that's overflowing with inventory you can't even use yet.
MRP operates as what's called a push system. Let's go back to that car example. The car company tells the computer, okay, we need to build 10,000 cars this month. That single number then pushes down through the entire system, automatically creating a chain reaction of orders for every single component, from engines and tires down to the tiniest screw, all based on that one initial forecast. Okay, so how does it actually do it? Let's walk through a super quick example for a product we'll call AA115. Step 1 is the bill of materials. Honestly, you can just think of this as the recipe. It lists every single part and piece you need. So, to make one AA115, you need 1 of subunit CM12 and 5 of subunit PR75. Simple enough, right? Next, the system does the math. So the company needs to make 40 of these things. If we look at that part, PR75, they need 5 of them for each final product. So 40 times 5, that's 200. But here's the really clever part. The system checks the warehouse and sees, hey, we've already got 35 of these lying around. So it automatically knows it only needs to order 165 more. It does this little calculation for every single component. And this brings us to the final brilliant step, the scheduling. The system knows the final product is due in week 6. It also knows that part PR75 takes 3 weeks to get. That's the lead time. So what does it do? It works backward and automatically schedules the order to be placed way back in week 3. This makes sure everything arrives just in the nick of time for production, and you're not paying to store parts for weeks on end.
So MRP was a total game changer for manufacturing, but it was really just scratching the surface. It solved the materials problem, but businesses were realizing they had information problems all over the place. So now let's zoom out and look at how this idea grew into the much, much bigger picture. ERP.
You can see this really clear evolution here. We start with MRP, which, as we said, just manages materials. Then that evolves into something called MRP2, which expands to manage the entire manufacturing process. We're talking machine schedules, cash flow, the works. And that, finally, leads to ERP, which takes this giant leap to try and manage the entire company.
And here it is. This is the core idea of ERP. It's an integrated system. Its whole reason for being is to break down those walls between departments. Accounting, HR, supply chain, production, by hooking them all up to one single shared database, one source of truth for the entire organization. Now, the latest generation of these systems, what people often call ERP2, took this whole integration thing even further. It wasn't just about managing the internal, back-office stuff anymore, like accounting or making the product. It started to include the front-office functions too, basically anything that involves interacting with the outside world, like sales or customer service.
So what this means is that modern ERPs now plug directly into the systems that manage all those outside relationships with your suppliers, with your customers, even with your strategic partners. The system isn't just running the company anymore. It's managing the company's entire ecosystem.
But, as you can probably imagine, trying to get an entire company onto one single software platform is a monumental task. The promise of what it can do is incredible for sure, but it also comes with a whole lot of peril.
I mean, just look at the trade-off here. On the one side, the advantages are huge. Lower costs, smarter decisions, happier customers, seamless global operations. But the flip side is just as massive. We're talking sky-high implementation costs, huge pushback from employees who don't want to change, and the very real possibility of a failed project that could actually cripple the company.
And this gets us to the really human and strategic side of it all, the nitty-gritty of implementation and a pretty important alternative for companies that just aren't ready to take that kind of leap: outsourcing.
And this might be the single most important takeaway here. Putting in an ERP is not really a tech project. It's a people project. It forces pretty much every single employee to change how they do their job, to unlearn old habits. And that, right there, is often the biggest reason these things fail.
A successful rollout, while it has to be incredibly methodical, it all starts with strategic planning. Then you've got the super careful selection of the software and your partners. And finally, you have this long, complex phase of pre-implementation where all the hard work of redesigning processes and converting data actually happens.
Now, looking at all that complexity, you can see why some companies might say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't handle that ourselves. And that's exactly where outsourcing comes in. It's when you pay another company, a third party, to handle an entire business function for you, like payroll or data processing.
And just like ERP, outsourcing has its own set of trade-offs. The benefits are pretty clear. You can reduce costs, get access to better technology. But the big limitation is you become dependent on that outside company, and you ultimately lose direct control over that part of your business. So let's bring this all back together. Let's return to that original metaphor for what an ERP system really is and why it has become so absolutely critical to the way modern business works. This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? By creating one database linked to all of the entity's applications, the ERP becomes that coordinating brain we talked about at the beginning, that central nervous system that allows a huge, sprawling organization to finally act like one single coherent thing. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. ERP was the great integrator for the modern business. It broke down the walls inside a company, and then it connected that company to the outside world. So the question is, what's next? What is going to be the next great integration that completely changes how businesses run?